This prison has developed a reputation as one of the toughest prisons in the world. Some inmates held here are serving sentences that stretch for centuries. CECOT opened in 2023 as part of El Salvador's unprecedented crackdown on gang violence. Built in just a matter of months, this prison was designed to hold up to 40,000 inmates, many of whom are members of the country's most feared gangs, including MS-13 and Barrio 18, and the conditions inside are unlike almost anything seen elsewhere in the world. I'm really interested to know what your thoughts are on these conditions, so let me know down in the comments. These cells hold up to 100 inmates at a time, which consist of rival gang members, people who would have once been separated due to the risk of violence, now living side by side. And within the cells, there is no privacy. They bathe and use the toilet in front of one another and sleep on metal beds with no mattress or pillow. Every aspect of daily life takes place under constant observation as each cell is monitored around the clock by armed guards. The majority of these guards wear masks to conceal their identities, protecting themselves and their families from potential retaliation outside the prison. And communication with the outside world is almost impossible here. There are no visitations and no phone calls. The prison was built with signal blocking technology, preventing inmates from contacting gang members beyond the prison walls. Something that was crucial, as you'll soon see from some of the cases we'll explore. And perhaps most strikingly of all, these prisoners never go outside. Instead, they spend 23.5 hours a day locked inside their cells. The remaining 30 minutes are reserved for heavily supervised exercise or Bible study before they're returned to confinement. The lights remain on 24 hours a day, so once you're inside, it's impossible to tell whether it's night or day. And the meals for these inmates are intentionally basic, consisting only of rice, beans, tortillas, and pasta. Meat is never included. And for those who break the rules, conditions become even harsher. Prisoners can be sent to solitary confinement, where they are locked inside a small concrete cell containing nothing more than a concrete bed, a toilet, and a sink. This room remains in complete darkness, and inmates can be held in there for up to 30 days. Thousands of tattooed prisoners sit packed together under the watch of heavily armed guards. Many of the tattoos are linked to gang membership, while some symbolise the crimes they've committed. One of the most recognised examples is a teardrop tattoo, which is said to indicate that the individual has committed murder. So, has removing gang members from the streets actually helped at all? For years, El Salvador was regarded as one of the most dangerous countries in the world, with entire communities living under the control of violent gangs. In response, President Nayib Bukele gave police and the military expanded powers, allowing them to arrest those suspected of gang affiliation as part of a nationwide crackdown. Since then, the country's homicide rates have fallen dramatically. What was once considered as one of the most dangerous nations on earth is now described as one of the safest countries in Latin America, bringing a sense of security that many residents had not experienced for decades. But this prison remains controversial. Some believe it is exactly how prisons should be, while others argue that the measures go too far and the conditions are inhumane. So to understand why a prison like this was built in the first place, let's take a look at just a handful of the gang members and leaders who helped turn El Salvador into one of the most dangerous countries on earth. For many people in El Salvador, this first case became a symbol of just how much control the gangs had gained over the country. In fact, the brutality of this attack was one of the major turning points that led to the extraordinary anti-gang measures that would follow in later years. On the 3rd of March 2016, residents of Pacheco heard multiple gunshots ring out within the area. What authorities would later discover was horrific. Among those later identified as taking part in this massacre was Arnoldo Dubon Castaneda, a member of the Barrio 18 gang. Earlier that day, 8 electrical workers had been installing power poles in the area. According to investigators, members of Barrio 18 had been actively searching for rivals from MS-13. Instead, they came across these workers. The victims had no connection to any gang. They had simply entered territory controlled by Barrio 18 without realising the danger they were walking into. The workers were attacked, restrained, and forced to lie on the ground with their hands tied behind their backs. One of the men reportedly attempted to escape, but he was shot immediately. Another was said to be carrying ID, linking him to the military. For this, gang members attacked him with a machete, while another member of the gang recorded the assault. The remaining workers were reportedly shot and killed. This footage later found its way onto social media, where it spread rapidly and shocked the country. The video clearly showed several of those involved, helping investigators identify the suspects. At first, authorities believed that there was just these 8 victims, but as they searched the surrounding area, the true scale of the massacre began to emerge. Roughly 300 metres away, investigators discovered 3 more bodies. These men had been local farmers cutting sugarcane nearby. According to investigators, they had witnessed the attack on the electrical workers, and for that reason alone, they too were killed. In total, 11 people lost their lives. Sadly, unlike many of the other cases covered on this channel, very few photos of the victims within this video appear to have been made publicly available, making it very difficult to put a face to their names. The investigation eventually led to the arrest of 9 Barrio 18 gang members, including 2 teenagers aged just 15 and 16. The 2 minors received sentences of 5 years and 15 years. Then the remaining 7 gang members, including Arnoldo, each received sentences of 390 years in prison, consisting of 35 years for each of the 11 murders, along with an additional 5 years for gang association. Today, Arnoldo is held inside CECOT, as well as the other 6 adult gang members convicted for their roles in the massacre. In El Salvador, this was tragically everyday news, completely random and innocent lives taken in the most brutal of ways. Which brings us to our next case. This next inmate is Carlos Oswaldo Angel Alvarado, another member of Barrio 18. He was just 22 years old when he became linked to what remains the deadliest attack carried out by street gangs in Salvadoran history. On the evening of the 20th of June 2010, authorities were alerted to a shooting on a Route 47 bus in the district of Jardín Mexicanos. 3 passengers had been shot and killed. At first, it appeared to be yet another tragic act of gang violence, but investigators would later conclude that this attack had served as a distraction for something even more horrific. Shortly afterwards, another Route 47 bus was targeted. This time, armed gang members forced their way on board and took control of the vehicle. The driver was threatened and ordered to change course before he was shot. With dozens of passengers still trapped inside, the attackers then doused the central aisle and the entrance of the bus with petrol. The doors were locked. Then the bus was set alight. Around 35 passengers were still on board. Panic immediately spread throughout the vehicle as passengers desperately searched for a way to escape, trying everything they could to break the windows. But gang members remained outside, waiting. If anyone managed to emerge from the flames and the smoke, they were met with gunfire. In total, 17 innocent people lost their lives, including children, and another 14 or 15 people suffered serious injuries, many of them left with life-changing burns. The attack shocked El Salvador and quickly became one of the country's most infamous crimes. Investigators later determined that the massacre was an act of revenge. The day before the attack, Carlos's brother, another Barrio 18 gang member, known by the name Crayola, had reportedly been killed by a member of the rival gang, MS-13. It was believed that those responsible had fled the scene using a Route 47 bus. But rather than targeting the individuals involved, the gang sought revenge against the bus route itself. The passengers on board had absolutely nothing to do with the original dispute. They were simply original people travelling home. 8 perpetrators were quickly arrested, including Carlos. Another associate linked to the attack, Gustavo Ernesto Lopez Huerzo, was also convicted and is also held at CECOT today. Gustavo received a sentence of 66 years for his involvement. 2 minors were also implicated in the case and received sentences as low as 3 years. Carlos, however, was identified as the mastermind behind the attack. According to reports, he was the individual who physically set the bus alight. For his role in this case, he was sentenced to 410 years in prison, an almost unimaginable sentence. Yet, inside CECOT, there are inmates serving even longer terms. One of them is Miguel Angel Pacheco Reyes, better known by the alias Dexter. Unlike the previous inmates we covered, Dexter's influence extended far beyond the prison walls. Dexter was a senior member of the MS-13 gang, and as investigators discovered, continued directing criminal activity despite already being incarcerated. In 2015, authorities discovered a plot to assassinate the mayor of La Union, Ezekiel Miller. The murder plan had allegedly been coordinated by Dexter from inside prison. Officials became aware of the plot after intercepting a phone call between Dexter and another gang member. The conversation had been captured through a wiretap, allowing authorities to uncover the plan before it could be carried out. But while that murder was prevented, other orders given by Dexter were not. Later that same year, authorities linked him to the killing of peace judge George Mauricio Gonzalez. On the 25th of October 2015, at around 2 p.m, Judge Gonzalez was ambushed and shot outside his own home. As investigators examined the case, intercepted phone calls pointed towards Dexter and other members of his MS-13 clique known as ULS. According to prosecutors, the judge had been targeted because of his anti-gang work and the role he played within the justice system. But even then, the violence didn't stop. In February 2016, a 25-year-old woman named Ruby Areli Flores was arrested alongside another woman for smuggling illegal cigarettes. However, Ruby was later released after authorities determined the illegal merchandise had been found on the other woman and not her. After being informed of her release, Dexter became convinced that Ruby had been cooperating with police and had provided information in exchange for her freedom. There was no evidence to support this claim, but that didn't matter. Dexter ordered her murder and hitmen were sent to carry out the attack. Ruby was shot multiple times in front of her 3 young children, aged just 9, 5 and 3. Tragically, she was also 5 months pregnant at the time. It was clear to investigators that even while incarcerated, gang leaders still had power. They were capable of issuing orders, identifying targets, and arranging killers through associates on the outside. In 2019, Dexter was finally convicted for numerous crimes connected to his role within MS-13. Some reports claimed he was linked to around 50 murders. For his crimes, Dexter's final sentence resulted in more than 1,500 years in prison. Our final inmate, Raúl Alexander Cortez Mariona, was one of the men who played a role in a revenge killing that had allegedly been orchestrated from prison. The victims included a pregnant mother, 2 young brothers, and a 15-year-old girl. On the 2nd of June 2006, 4 men wearing balaclavas arrived in Plan de la Laguna, Antiguo Cuscatlan. They stepped out of a BMW and approached their targets. Among them was 40-year-old Vilma Esperanza Santos. That morning, Vilma was preparing to sell food and sweets alongside her 2 children, 12-year-old Danny Alexander and 8-year-old Luis Alfredo. Also with them was family friend 15-year-old Myra Lisseth. The gunman opened fire in a relentless attack. Investigators would later recover more than 60 spent casings from the scene, fired from M16 rifles and pistols. Danny Alexander and Luis Alfredo had both been killed. Reporters later stated that the two brothers were found embracing one another, seemingly trying to protect each other during the attack. 15-year-old Myra Lisseth was shot in the neck and back. She was rushed to hospital, but died while being transported for treatment. Vilma survived the initial attack, but had suffered critical injuries. She too later succumbed to her injuries in hospital. At the time, she was also 22 weeks pregnant. In total, 4 lives were lost, as well as an unborn child. As investigators pieced together the motive, they concluded that the murders had not been random. According to authorities, the attack was an act of revenge. It was believed that Vilma had been acting as a witness in an ongoing case involving Barrio 18 gang members. For that reason, she had been marked for death. But the fact that the children were also killed demonstrated just how little regard the attackers had for innocent lives. The investigation eventually led to the conviction of several individuals connected to the crime, including Raúl. For his involvement in the murders, he was sentenced to 60 years in prison. It's also important to note that these crimes we've covered are just a small sample. Many of the gang members within these walls were linked to multiple murders, extortion schemes, kidnappings, and other violent offences stretching over many years. Some see the conditions inside CECOT as unnecessarily harsh, while others point to cases like these: families murdered, children caught in the crossfire, witnesses targeted simply for speaking out, and argue that extraordinary crimes lead to extraordinary measures. After hearing just a handful of the crimes committed by the men inside CECOT, do you think the conditions are too harsh, or exactly what they deserve? Let me know down in the comments.